I want to give everybody just a minute or two to log on before I kind of start the introductions. I see the attendee list growing, which is always very exciting. Awesome. Well, since we are right at 6, while people log on, I can start to do a bit of an introduction and let people kind of get going and catching up and up to speed as the attendees continue to get here. So hi everyone, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're super excited to have all of you here and all of our panelists here, and to have what I'm sure will be a really fascinating and exciting and wonderful dialogue between our 4 guests here. So on behalf of ITADC, I want to thank you all for joining. By way of introduction, my name is Kristen Rajasel, and I'll be your moderator. I'm one of the chapter leaders of ITA's DC chapter. For those of you joining us who may not be familiar with ITA, which stands for Impact Travel Alliance, we are an independent nonprofit that's aimed at improving the world through travel. Our mission is to educate travelers on how to spend their money mindfully so that their experiences empower locals and protect the environment. Hosting local events like this one is one of the main ways that we do this, but our website has additional stories and tips and other events from our chapters that are all around the world. Outside of my involvement with ITA, I am actually a business development manager at Brand Bureau, which is a creative agency in New York that is strongly rooted in hospitality. We're a part of a larger global organization that includes our very own hospitality group with bar and restaurant concepts around the world. So clearly the topic we are about to discuss is very near and dear to me, and I'm very excited to be involved in this conversation. Before we get started, I wanted to mention a couple just housekeeping notes. We encourage you all to ask questions throughout the conversation by using the Q&A feature, which you'll see kind of on the bottom of the Zoom screen. I'll be tracking these throughout the conversation, but we'll save the last 15 minutes or so to answer them to really let the conversation flow for a while. We won't be using the raise hand feature, or we'll keep the chat box for dialogue only. So just again, please be sure to use that Q&A. Okay, we'll also be recording today's discussion just so that you're all aware. Getting into it, we're super excited about this one. It came together as a convergence of interests, first as a way to help our fellow Washingtonians explore our city while being locked down with travel restrictions, but then also helping to promote the restaurant industry that we all love so much, but is unfortunately going through a really tough time with all of the dining restrictions from COVID. So I want to say a special thank you to our 4 panelists for being willing to talk to us about the dining scene of our city and what makes it so special and how we can all get out and explore it, but of course safely with everything happening right now. So I'll take a moment to introduce everyone, and then we'll dive into the questions. So first up, we've got 2 power players in the food and beverage journalism field, Ruth Tam and Tierney Plumb. Ruth is a writer, illustrator, and co-host of WAMU's podcast, Dish City. On Dish City, Ruth and her co-host Patrick Fort tell the stories of the people and places that make DC's iconic food scene and dishes as famous as it is. However, they recently launched their 2nd season and had a really wonderful plan, but like many things, shifted this spring. And so now they've focused on covering the pandemic's effect on the DC area's local food systems. So super fascinating and definitely something you should all check out. Tierney is a senior associate editor at Eater DC. She writes about all aspects of the restaurant industry here in DC, from industry news, openings and closings, to those super helpful lists of where to eat and for what occasion. She recently rounded up a couple of great dining inspiration in the time of COVID pieces about outdoor patios and new pop-ups. So a really great resource for all of our DC dining explorers. Next, we are glad to be joined by the owners of 2 restaurants that we've featured on the Passport to Dining list that hopefully all of you have received, or if you signed up after we sent that, we'll send it to you after this. Patrice Cleary and Yamrut Isne. Patrice is the chef owner of Purple Patch, a Filipino-American restaurant in Mount Pleasant. She opened Purple Patch in 2015 as one of the first Filipino restaurants in the city, which also means that Purple Patch celebrated its 5-year anniversary right around when the COVID shutdown started in March. Since then, the restaurant has reopened for takeout, but they've also transitioned into a market called the Purple Patch Pantry, where you can pick up everything from Filipino snacks to fresh cuts of meat, fresh flowers, grab-and-go specials, a variety of beverages. Definitely check it out. Yamrot is the restaurateur owner of Latena, Ethiopian restaurant in Columbia Heights. Originally from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, she's been living in Columbia Heights since 2008 and saw the need for some quality Ethiopian cuisine to contribute to the diverse neighborhood that already was there. And so after years of hard work and preparation, Latena opened its doors in October 2016 and has received really great reviews ever since. It means for health in Amharic, which is amazing. And so true to its identity, they use only natural and premium ingredients, and Latena is currently open for takeout and dining in. So absolutely recommend stopping by that one as well. So again, a big thank you all for speaking with us today, and let's dive right in. Okay, so first question I'm going to address to all of you, but let's kick it off with Ruth. How has the international food scene in DC grown or changed over the years? You know, what characterizes it today, and how do you think it will continue to evolve?
Hey, Kristen, thank you so much for bringing us all together for this call, and hello, everyone. Thanks for spending your night with us. I think that's a great question. I think I've only been here for the past 7.5 years or so, but from what I've heard from the people that have been here for longer, it seems that DC has really seen a huge boom in food businesses, and in particular for international food spots. What I've heard is that a lot of places may have started in DC proper, but in the maybe last 20 years or so have spread out into the suburbs more, into strip malls or small markets that kind of double as cafes. So, you know, even if things have either spread out to Maryland or Virginia in the suburbs, or if they've stayed here, they've doubled as kind of businesses with multiple identities that serve multiple functions. I think we'll see more immigrant-owned businesses continue to expand further outside of DC as the city gets more expensive and harder to start businesses here. And in terms of how they'll continue to evolve, not to start off this lovely talk on a bleak note, but honestly, if we don't see landlords collaborating more with their restaurant tenants, I think we're going to see a lot of international food spots that are immigrant owned. These places that are really near and dear to our hearts, they will we'll see them close during this pandemic if we don't see a major shift soon.
Totally, and it's super unfortunate, but I do agree, and I think we've seen a lot of that happening already, which is super sad. Tierney, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so kind of going off what Ruth said, and hi everyone, thanks for joining as well. So I think definitely a lot of people know about Eden Center. It's a Vietnamese center food hall in Falls Church that's been around for decades, but there hasn't really been a rise of other types of food centers like that bring lots of cuisines really under one roof. So I think the ramped up construction of like the block there, Virginia-based food hall, they just put one in downtown DC, and they have an amazing chef. She's making all these Vietnamese sweets, and she's kind of just running it on her own right now during the pandemic, but doing really well. And Union Market, there's of course so many cuisines under one roof. You can find ramen, dumplings, super spicy Thai. So I think you know, developers and owners and chefs, they know that DC is, you know, getting outside of its comfort zone when it comes to different cuisine types it wants to try, and we're such an international city in general. So I think a lot of developers are making it easier for diners to kind of just wander around and see what they're craving any time of the week or day and be able to have a lot to choose from. So I think that'll only grow. There's also a new ghost kitchen going up Northwest, and that's going to have ramen, Mexican cuisine in it. So that's another way for chefs who are still up and coming. Maybe they don't know if they're going to open their own standalone restaurant. It's a good way for them to test out their menu options and just get a taste of what the neighborhood wants. So I think we'll continue to see more of that.
Absolutely. I think the ghost kitchen thing is going to be really interesting to see where people take it. As restaurant owners, I would love to hear, Yamra, do you want to tell us what you're thinking about or what you've seen in your years of having a restaurant and where you think it's going to evolve into?
I moved to the area in 2007, so my view is limited to that. My observation is since then. Moving here, prior to this, I used to live in London, so we were, indulged with various, cuisines. But when I got here, one thing I noticed was the limited options at the time. But since then, I have to say, the selection has grown, and this is becoming the center for global food or global cuisine. So for me, I've seen that change, and as a restaurateur, that puts us on our toes. It keeps us on our toes because we always have to actually meet the demand of the changing palette, and people are growing more and more aware of the variety that the world can offer. So we're always on our toes, and we're always trying to up our game. So I feel like it's DC is doing really well in that aspect.
Totally agree with you. I think DC is great at that. Patrice, your thoughts?
Hi, Kristen, thanks. I going back to what Yamrat said of like the globalization of food coming to Washington, D.C. If you just look within the past 5 years, the transformation where we have gone, you have places like, Tip Cow that opened up, that's Laotian food, that we didn't have Laotian food, 5 years ago. And then you have like Bami, which is Burmese food that just opened up, not even a year ago. Who knew about Burmese food before then? And then Filipino food, myself and Bad Saint, we both opened up around the same time. And, we brought a lot, all three of us, our restaurants, we've brought a lot to the food scene. And I feel like it's become more adventurous. People want more. They want to know more about, dining outside of their comfort zone. And so I really see this as endless possibilities of, you have people that are just home cooks that are cooking in their kitchen that never knew that they could actually cook outside of their home. And they're taking a chance because someone has said, your food is really good. And they're taking it not from their home anymore, but inside of a pop-up. And then it goes from a pop-up to a restaurant. And that's how, honestly, that's how most of us have started. We started in our homes, and we've taken our home food into, kitchens, and we have become restaurants now. And people, I see that people want more of that.
Yeah, that's great. That leads me into what was my next question anyway, but it's a wonderful transition. So I'm going to come right back to you, Patrice. I'm just curious why you opened a restaurant in DC. What about DC spoke to you as the place to bring your culinary vision and share with us?
I've lived in DC for quite a long time, since about 2000. Just to give you a little bit of background about me, I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps. I worked on Wall Street for a while. I came back to DC, and I just didn't want to inbox anymore. So I, dived into the restaurant industry because every day is a new day. But I love DC. Honestly, like if I was to do this all over again, I would pick DC because it really is this, other people might see it as a big city, but when you're in it, it's really such a small place that everybody knows each other and we all support each other. And it's really such a family. So I love DC, and I could not think of a better place to open up a restaurant but DC.
Fantastic. Yamra, why did you choose DC? Is it the same feeling for you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know much about DC to say as much, but now I do. Definitely is a family feel. It has a family feel. All our customers are real supporters, and you feel you want to be there for them rather than just be there for the business of it. Currently, being open doesn't justify it, but we're open because we want to make sure that our community is not is actually getting the service they want. And this is because we've built that relationship over the years. And because of that, I love DC generally. But the reason I opened the Latina is more because I always felt Ethiopian food has a lot to offer in terms of nutritional value, in terms of health value. So, when we opened, the whole objective was for us to actually bring that to our community in a setting where we can educate our diner about the culture for its true value. So that was the main objective when we opened it. But over the years, of course, it evolves, and then you feel like, you always want to go back and see your regular customers. It becomes friendship. It becomes more than what you just see as a business.
Yeah, it's great. I want to get into a little bit of kind of this idea of acting like a tourist during lockdown and memorable dining experiences. So Tierney, do you want to tell us about a memorable dining experience you've had in DC that made you feel like you got to kind of escape and go somewhere special during this time?
Sure. Well, yes, as the phases have been, progressing, I feel better about being outside the house. I personally still only like to be on patios. That's just me. But I did have a great meal last week in Penn Quarter at Karma Modern. They're an Indian spot right near Capital One Arena. Usually, they're flooded with foot traffic. It's pretty sad how empty they were, but the chef, they are doing a good job, I guess, with takeout delivery. But I'm glad it felt normal again. Just sit there. Chef is amazing. He's so artistic with all of his plates and his designs of his sauces. And you get to try kind of like a good cross section of the menu that way with this 8-plate meal that they do. And it was just a nice escape. But in my place, I have been ordering takeout delivery like crazy really since April. So I've been really trying to try a good cross section places I wouldn't normally. There's a great LGBT owned dumpling shop. They're running out of Union Market Mulan dumplings. And so I tried a lot of what their latest and greatest that they're doing. They make everything fresh daily. I was in a friend's backyard recently, and she's Bolivian, she's one of my best friends, and she found out about a new street snack spot that's operating at a mess hall, and it's kind of like an empanada. So it was great to try something that she was super familiar with, made her miss home. She was supposed to be in Bolivia right now visiting family, so we all cheers to her and with the Salatinas. Yeah.
I know it's not the same thing, but at least you got to enjoy some kind of treat from there.
Yeah.
That's great. And Ruth, I'd love to hear from you about any memorable dining that you've had that made you feel like you were on a trip, or, acting like a tourist through food or anything like that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Kristen. I think first, before I get into that question, I'd kind of like to unpack what I think is like the subtext of that question. I think the idea of eating like a tourist in your home city or your home country right now, like especially that question being posed by ITA, we often interpret that question as being like, oh, where have you eaten that is like an international cuisine, or what have you eaten that it's like immigrant food, and that makes you feel like you're traveling to another country right now. I understand why people would ask that question. People kind of want to be transported right now, but I have to say I don't typically love that framing of the question, because even though food can definitely be transportive, I think that kind of thinking about it that way sometimes otherizes food that is already part of our local landscape, even if it originated somewhere else. Right? Like Italian food was once international and immigrant cuisine, but that feels very American to us now. And when we think of being a traveler, we don't think of necessarily eating spaghetti and meatballs. So I just feel like this is kind of like slightly a double standard in terms of what we consider to be like food that we want to transport us. And I also think that it maybe puts a lot of weight on food to represent other people's cultures in ways that might be a little too easy. Like traveling is traveling. The only way that we can be tourists is to travel. And under these circumstances, we have to redefine what that means now. So I think in my case, like the times that I felt like a traveler is when I have been able to travel. And I did recently go on a socially distanced hike in Shenandoah, and the food that made me feel most like a traveler, most like a tourist, is honestly when I stopped by Front Royal and I, had burgers and hot dogs at Spelunkers. And that made me feel like I was on, a road trip, because I was. And I think that there are ways that you can actually very carefully travel these days, if you do have access to a card. And even if you don't, maybe what you can do is maybe walk one neighborhood further than you normally would have, or try something new on a menu that you normally wouldn't have. And these are kind of ways that we can consider being a traveler. And going back to, like, I think what is the original subtext of your question, I think if we want to kind of have that experience of traveling and getting to know food from other countries and get to know other cultures better through food, maybe a better way to think about it is how to be a good neighbor as opposed to being a tourist.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your perspective on that. I think it is really a worthy conversation, and part of what we're trying to talk about here is just all the great offerings that we have just outside your door, just walking next door. And that's why we made sure also in our guide to include North American like burger joints and stuff too, because that's just as much traveling, like you said, in Shenandoah, as much as it could be to experience a cuisine that you're not as familiar with, perhaps. So thank you very much for that. I think that's absolutely something that is worth thinking about when we have these kinds of conversations. I do want to take a minute and address dining responsibility in the current climate, because obviously that's something that has already come up in a lot of our dialogue so far and is very prevalent just with the way that everybody is interacting with the F&B industry at the moment anyway. So I'm going to kick this off by going to Yamrote first. I know you've decided to reopen Lieutenant. So what are your recommendations for being a responsible guest when diners come to visit you during this COVID restriction time?
I mean, the most important one I would say is be patient with us. We have certain rules that we never had before implemented now. For instance, we only, like I said, we're only doing takeouts, and for instance, we don't allow the use of bathroom. That's mainly because there is no way we can control once we have a guest inside, is to see. So we could offend some customers mainly because they'd be spending so much on takeout, but then they're not allowed to use the restroom, which is, we can understand. But the only way we can control that is when we have a blanket rules. So please be patient with us, as one thing I would say. Other than that, mask wearing, we never had a problem so far. Everybody walks in, we have the sign posted, so everybody walks in with their masks on. Sanitize as much as you can, order online when you can. So by doing that, we can always make sure our interface time is very limited.
That's great tips. I'm glad to hear that you haven't had any issues with mask wearing. That's encouraging. Patrice, what are your recommendations?
Kristen, I definitely recommend customers to maybe call in advance first, just to see what their guidelines are for, dining in or dining out. A lot of us have streeteries now, which is, basically patio seating, but it's on the street. There are certain rules that, each restaurant adheres to through the Department of Health. Like, one is everybody has to wear a mask. A lot of times customers will come in and they'll come in with their mask, but then they'll sit down and totally forget that they ever had a mask. And, you have to stop thinking about yourself sometimes and maybe think about the people that are putting themselves at risk by making sure that you're taken care of. My employees coming up to you and having a conversation about what you would like to order. We're trying to make it as personable as possible, but when somebody does approach your table that isn't a part of your party, I think I think you should put on your mask. I mean, we've asked people to do it before. They've taken their masks off and we've had to ask them, like, would you mind putting on your mask, please? And I think people just don't understand. They feel like they're outside, so it should be okay. But again, it's taking yourself and not putting yourself first, but putting other people first and maybe their level of comfort. Also, we ask that everybody give us, one person at the party give us a name for contact tracing, a name and telephone number. We're not trying to keep track of you and what you've done. We're not going to report this to anyone, but if something does happen, we want to be able to contact you. Please don't take it personal in a way where we're trying to offend you in any way by taking this information. It's to protect you and us at the same time. Another thing is, because now a lot of us are doing, like either indoor or outdoor seating, we're still trying to figure out different protocols of like preparing food. We're running 2 different restaurants at the same time. We're running a carryout and we're running a restaurant. And a lot of us that are restaurants may not have ever ran a carryout before. And now we're running both. And so we have carryout plates, carryout containers, and then we have, plates as well. And we have orders coming in all at the same time because, of course, restaurants, we're trying to maximize the amount of money that we can make. So we have different sources that are coming in. We've got Caviar, we've got DoorDash, we've got Grubhub, whatever it is, Uber Eats. And then you have, customers sitting on the patio. Well, now you multiply that by the number of people that are taking orders or orders that are coming in. And sometimes the kitchens can be overwhelmed. And so just like Yamrat said, just being a little bit patient with us and understanding. And I will say that to this point, we have not had any problems whatsoever with that. Customers have been very patient with us. The only problem that I have seen is just, reinforcing the fact that we'd like you to wear your mask when we do come to your table.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's all super helpful. I hope everybody out there thinks so too. Tierney, what have you been telling your readers?
So we're in phase 2, which is half capacity indoor now. I think, yes, more people are comfortable with venturing out now, and I think that is great for restaurants and the city in general. Like a couple examples of recent meals out. I went to Cuba Libre, they are a big chain, they're Cuban food. They do a good job, I think. They kind of like have it down to a science at this point, like all the steps that they take. Some of them almost comical, like the waiters wear like tech suits and are spraying between every meal. But some stuff is useful, like they have these disposable bags that they give, which I thought was a good idea, because you put your mask on the table typically when you sit down, and having your mask touch anything isn't good. So they give you like these disposable bags to put your mask in as you're sitting at the table. I thought that was cool. But I mean, I think restaurants can have like, a little fun with it in a way, like Convivial, this French restaurant. They converted French restaurant Shaw, they converted these squeeze ketchup containers into hand sanitizers at the table. So I mean, it's like useful but kind of cute and has its logo on it. So I think there are different ways to make like all the strict cleaning standards not look so ugly. I don't know.
That's really playful. And I saw something else about, don't put your mask on the table, things that people may not even really be thinking much about, just like put it on your lap or put it in a pocket or something. So having the bags there, that's also a great option.
Yeah.
Ruth, anything that you guys have been talking about with responsible dining right now?
Yeah, I feel like I'd like to, hear it straight from a restaurateur is very valuable. People often assume that what makes them comfortable is what makes other people comfortable. And in this time, if you're going to dine in, you need to divorce yourself from this previously conceived law that the customer is always right. You should do your research, like Patrice said. You should know what a restaurant's policy is before you visit. A restaurant's dine-in policy it may be stricter than what the city requires, for example. So, or they may not have the same menu anymore. I've heard that you should order all your food and drinks at once, so you can kind of minimize the times that you interact with a server or interact with another person. If a restaurant requires reservations, stick to your reservation. Don't cancel it last minute. Don't be late. That's a further loss of business when restaurants can only have 50% occupancy, for example. And then, just to tip generously, I think that if you want your favorite businesses to survive, you need to share support in financial ways, but also to tell your friends and family about where you enjoy eating. Restaurants really thrive on that word of mouth. And in this time when people don't necessarily feel comfortable going out, if you do and you feel comfortable and you enjoyed your experience, just you should share that knowledge with other people. And that's really kind of paying it back to restaurants who have done so well to serve our communities over the past few years.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thanks for that. That's great. I want to take it back out of this for a minute and just kind of go back to visiting the city. I think we're all DC residents for various amounts of time and expertise and, areas, well, all food related, but what do you think visitors to DC see that residents don't, and vice versa? Like, what are we missing on either side of the coin? Patrice, what do you think?
I think visitors come to DC and they see it as this big city that may be hard to navigate. So I think they tend to go to places that they're more comfortable going to. When DC has so much to offer, and it really is very easy to get around. It's, I've lived in so many different cities, and I find that DC is very easy to get around, but also getting around in Uber. I recommend that people come to the city and just step outside of their comfort zone. Don't go to where you usually go. Go try something new, something different, because there's so much that the city does have to offer.
Totally agree. Tierney, any thoughts on DC residents versus visitors and what we're missing on either end?
Yeah, kind of echoing Patrice. I know I can't believe that old Ebbitt's, like the numbers that they do is insane every year. I mean, they have the business, it's right near the White House. But yeah, if I had never been to DC, I would like to think that wouldn't be my first place I'd go. So yeah, I mean, I'll give a shout out to the maps that we put on our website. We break down different cuisines by types, and we definitely try to showcase, the independent guys and not the big chains. So I'd point people to that if they're looking for new options to try that aren't the chains.
Yeah, I always try to point people away from the chains and really try to support the local businesses, the ones that are homegrown here, like yours, obviously. Yamra, what do you think? What are tourists missing, and what might we be missing as residents?
I say the tourists, we have a large proportion of our customers are tourists. And I say they seem to do their homeworks better than the locals, because when you're a local, you just, into your habits. So you just go to wherever you always went to for Japanese, or you don't explore the city as much. Whereas when a tourist is visiting DC, then take the time to understand what DC has to offer. So they seem to get around better than, I would say, the locals.
I'm curious if you've seen any change now that we haven't had tourists. I know that restaurants have been limited in how much they're able to do right now anyway, but without the visitors to our city, has there been an increase in locals coming to your restaurant, or have you seen any kind of difference of traffic, if you can measure it, given what restrictions we're under?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we've been impacted by lack of tourism generally, because I would say about 30% of our customers were tourists. So losing that proportion is not easy, but at the same time, the locals try their best to order more frequently. So I think that helps.
That's great.
Yeah.
Patrice, have you seen anything?
I'm very fortunate to be in a wonderful community. It's Mount Pleasant. We're nestled in between Adams Morgan and Columbia Heights. And they really, really support. It's kind of trifecta for me between my local community. The Filipino community is huge in supporting each other, and the Filipino community definitely comes out and they support. They post social media to ensure that their restaurants are taken care of. Also, this is the time when there's a lot of takeout, and so people are sitting at home right now, and they're getting more adventurous. They're like, you know, we've had that before. Let's try this. Let's try something new, something different. So to be honest, our caviar business has increased probably. I mean, we had caviar before, and what we had before and what we have now, it's increased probably by 70%, 75%. It's really keeping us alive, to the point where one day caviar just glitched out on us and we couldn't contact anybody. And that's a whole nother conversation, but businesses really rely on takeout and delivery, and to not have that accessible, you know, resource of like being able to pick up the phone and saying, hey, something's wrong, can you fix it? Really hamstrings you. But we were without caviar for a day and a half, and I went into panic mode, like, oh my God, if this happens anymore, I might have to shut down for a couple of days. So what we have noticed is there's been such an increase on caviar because people want to try new things right now. This is their opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm going to totally go out of sequence here for a second, because a question did come in about food delivery options. So on the heels of the caviar conversation, I just want to ask this question: what food delivery service options do you prefer customers to use? Should they call on the phone to make a pickup order, or apps, or kind of what's your preferred method?
I'm going to be completely honest. I'm on Toast, and Toast Tab is wonderful. You have access to my whole pantry. So you have access not only to my menu, but things that you would walk into my restaurant and say, oh, I want these chips. I want this pastry. I want whatever's in my restaurant in the pantry, you have access to. Whereas caviar and all the other ones only have access to my menu, and they still charge upwards of 15 to, I mean, I'm not going to call any one service out right now, but for a while I was getting charged 22% when the mayor had mandated 15%. I kindly sent them an email, and fortunately they refunded me all the money back that they had taken, which was wonderful. And that's why I'm not calling them out. But with Toast Tab, they don't charge you, the customer, and they don't charge us either if you're going to pick up your food. It's just a resource that's available for you. So I ask on behalf of my restaurant, Purple Patch, if you do want to pick up and you're not doing delivery, order through Toast Tab. It's wonderful. It really is.
I have seen that a lot more on restaurant websites lately, Toast Tab, and that makes total sense as to why. Yamra, what's your preferred method?
We actually went into our website. We can order from our website, and we do our in-house delivery as well. So if people are ordering, then definitely we encourage them to come through our own websites rather than the food delivery apps.
Yeah, absolutely. Ruth, I saw you nodding along. Have you guys addressed this in your podcast on the COVID response? Takeout.
Yeah, let me pull up my podcast app to see what episode it was.
Sure.
This was something that we did talk about because early in the pandemic, it became really clear that delivery was going to be a lifeline for a lot of local restaurants. And yet there are so many sites that make a killing off of what is a very vulnerable situation. And all the fees that they charge restaurants are so invisible to customers. And I don't think people realize until there was more reporting on this, that every time Grubhub or DoorDash offers the customer some sort of discount, or 15% off your order, or get $20 off your first order or stuff, anything like that, like the restaurant is the one that pays for that. It's not the delivery company. So if that's something that you want to use, just be aware of that. And if you're getting delivery to support a restaurant, just know that your choice in delivery service can have maybe less of an impact than you might think. We talked about this in our May 7th episode of Dish City, and we titled this episode "The Moral Calculus of Buying Food During a Pandemic." So we talked about all these the kind of ethical calculus that you have to do to figure out how to best support restaurants and how to be safe during this time, which is obviously a shifting thing.
Right. There you go. Everybody write that down. Thank you. Awesome. So we do have a lot of questions coming in, so I want to make time to get to them, but first I want to go once around the group. Let's start with Tierney. When you can travel again, where will you be going?
When I have more money again, if that stimulus check comes in. No, lucky enough, I actually got in a really good trip right before this all happened in February. I went to Belize, and it was like just a dream vacation, seeing the Mayan ruins and just beautiful snorkeling and stuff. So I feel like I got my spoiled trip in for this year. I mean, maybe Tulum next year. I know everyone and their mom wants to go there though, so maybe I'll hold on. I'd rather do Mexico City, to be honest. So maybe Mexico City, yes.
Because the food in Mexico City is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Architecture, yes.
Yeah. Wow, that was great timing on the Belize trip. Well done. Ruth, where would you go?
So many places on the list, but I just chose one of them at random because they're all just of equal importance to me. I've never been to Korea. I would love to go to Korea, South Korea. In terms of being a food destination, I feel like the country has so much to offer, and I would just love to visit and eat all that food that I've enjoyed from so far away for the first time in the country of its origin.
That is actually near the top of my list too, so I hear you. Yamrot?
I have quite a long list of places that I want to be to, but obviously I've been putting it off because of Latina and other life events. But one thing I've realized after COVID is you can't take it for granted, and it's do it while you can. So my plan would be to go to India, mainly because of the cultural similarity that we have with Indian food and all kind of various other cultural aspects. So I want to go and see it from the source. So that's would be my next.
Absolutely fascinating country to explore. Patrice?
Just like everyone else, there's a long list of places I'd like to go to. But just two off the top of my head, my son lives in California and I have not been able to see him through this whole COVID. He usually spends the summer with me, but he has not been able to travel. So the first plane I get on will definitely be California. And then I spent a lot of time in the Azores, Portugal, and that really kind of made me appreciate food at the most rudimentary level. And so I would love to go back to the Azores, Portugal.
Me too. I want to get to some questions. We've got a variety here. I'm going to start with this one that came in like way back at the beginning. Where do you guys go when you just need a comfort food experience? Ruth, I'll call you that.
Well, comfort food is really subjective, right? I think comfort food is probably defined by how you grew up and who was cooking for you and what kind of evokes those positive memories. And for me, that's Cantonese cuisine. It's Cantonese food. Whenever my family visits, we go to Hong Kong Pearl out in Virginia, which is near Eden Plaza, which Tierney mentioned earlier as being kind of a hub for not only Vietnamese cuisine, but a lot of other Asian foods now at this point. And so I would go there and get dim sum with my family if that were possible. I don't know if they're doing takeout at this point, I would imagine so. But yeah, when I can't get that kind of food out at a restaurant, I make it myself. And early in this pandemic, I made wonton mein, which is wonton noodle soup. And that is what my go-to comfort food was earlier during all of this.
Great. Patrice, do you have a comfort food?
I'm a sucker for pasta, and so my comfort spot in the city is Red Hen. Like I've always had a great meal at Red Hen, and so yes, Red Hen.
Tierney, do you agree with this? I saw you.
Oh yeah, I love red wine. No pasta and ham too, always. I think actually RPM here, the one here does a good job. And they have a great Pomodoro for like $14. So it's a really good deal. I also just had a really good tom yum at Nushi Sushi that they actually put noodles in it and it didn't explode in the bag on the way over. So I got my pasta fixed that way. Yeah.
It's a good one too. Yamro, what's your favorite comfort food?
I have to say, for me, it's Ethiopian. Like, I guess that's what I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
But it's no, they're not mostly they're not a very typical menu items because of the certain flavor profile. So definitely it's the Ethiopian for me.
Makes sense. So we've got a couple COVID related ones. I don't know if you all want to answer all of these. I'll try to say maybe a couple of you. So with patio season sadly coming to an end, have there been any talks about how to prepare for the fall and winter and how, you know, you might foresee the pivot yet again and the biggest challenge of that?
I'll answer that. You know, it's scary. I'll be honest, like as a restaurateur that has patio seating, that is now relying heavily on patio seating as well as carry out. It was important for me to hire back employees. And so this has created more jobs. And so it's scary for me to think that I would have to let employees go because I don't have enough work for them. It's difficult because I want to believe that this is going to be a very mild winter like it was last year and that it'll bring us into January with just a cool breeze and no snow. And I feel like if I can think that and believe that, it'll come into reality. So that's what I'm hoping for.
So Ruth, I'm curious, because I know you've been covering like landlord issues in your past too. Have you guys talked to anybody about the regulations around outdoor dining?
Not so much as in relation to the landlords. I know, so my co-host and I are kind of working on 2 separate episodes at the moment. So I know he just sat in on an ABRA training session. So it's the bummer that he's not here to answer this question for me. But I personally haven't, and I've just mostly talked to restaurant workers who have to kind of are put in the uncomfortable position of having to enforce rules out on a patio or in a space where kind of people expect to be taken care of in the same way as before. But in terms of regulation, I don't really know if landlords have a big say in that. They are mostly just, it's just like a manager's, I think, responsibility at that point. Should I answer something else?
We have a question about information. So when trying to find out the latest related information for restaurants, like hours and outdoor seating now available, reservations needed, what's the best source? Where do you go to look? Websites, Instagram, Twitter, kind of where do you find the knowledge?
For restaurants, is this like from a restaurant owner's perspective? Because maybe Patrice, like, is this like how restaurants want to be kept informed, or is this as a diner?
It's for the diner to find out what the status is of the restaurant, I guess. What's the best source to find out?
Is there a master list that has and like updates on different restaurants? Tierney, would you have access to something like that?
Oh, of course. I mean, I cold call a lot of people to like double check what their hours are and options. Sometimes websites aren't updated, but I think the best way to check is honestly like their Instagram handle. Usually they put it right under their profile of, you know, what their current hours are. Look at their most recent photo that they've posted. Usually it's like, this is what this week's specials are. I think that's smart on restaurateurs' part to put it there. You know, if they can't change their website right away to let customers know, that's like one easy way.
And in light of the situation with landlords and potentially being shut out and not wanting restaurants to go away, we've been getting takeout as much as we can. Are there other things that anybody could do that you recommend to help support the local restaurants?
So when we first started doing the COVID, I wanted to give back to the community. And so we do breakfast and lunch for children in the community every day from 10 to 1. No questions asked. They just come in and they'll say, I need 5 meals, and we put together 5 meals for them. I will say that the community has really rallied around that and has kind of worked with me and helped me in regards to either bringing in goods to my restaurant, snacks or juice boxes. I think sometimes it's not what you can do for yourself, but what you can do for others. And I have the resources right now to be able to do that. We had a fundraising event last Sunday on our patio where somebody had a lot of pottery and they just needed to get rid of all this pottery. So they sold their pottery for a very cheap price, and everything that they made, they gave back to us in the restaurant so that we could help provide meals for the kids. And so far we've provided close to 3,500 meals since COVID started.
Wow, that's fantastic. Anything else, Yamrod? Anything that you would suggest as other ways to support?
The only thing I would highlight is the work of IRC, the Independent Restaurant Coalition. They're trying to achieve quite a lot through Congress. So please look into their websites and see how you could contribute on our behalf. So that would definitely help.
Yeah, totally.
Either DC, well, the whole network. We just
nationwide.
Sorry. I was just going to say we put out a series of how to help guides for each city. So yeah, we mentioned, Patrice, what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Yesterday, so it's on our site of how to help, volunteer, donate, all in one place. But on another note, just I'd say buy alcohol because that's, they're a huge revenue stream for restaurants anyway. And the fact that we're in this wild, wild west of the to-go cocktails, I mean, like, just take advantage of it. And there's some really fun options out there. I'm working on a map for tomorrow actually, about the latest and greatest.
Can't wait to read that. Okay, can you talk about your take, anybody who wants to, maybe Ruth, if you've anything you've discovered in your interviews about the long-term ramifications that we may see as COVID dissipates?
I think some of the long-term ramifications that we are seeing are already in place. Like, when we first started talking, we talked about the possibility of restaurant closures, and in some neighborhoods, you can definitely see the impact of that already. I've heard from Jamie Leeds, who is the owner of Hank's Oyster Bar and a number of other local restaurants, that in the long term, she can kind of see that middle management positions in restaurants maybe won't exist anymore. Like, she won't feel like she has the money to employ some kind of like middle manager in their restaurant that kind of assisted in their restaurant operations, and it'll be a more streamlined process in terms of employment. So I think we're going to see people like leaving the restaurant industry, especially now that we've seen federal unemployment benefits stop after July 31st. People are going to be exiting this industry, looking for other options because there isn't any choice. A lot of people are still laid off or furloughed. Restaurants will close because they either don't feel comfortable opening up for business, or even if they do, they won't get the money back that they still owe their landlords. So kind of the worst case scenario is upon us, and already has happened for a lot of people, to be depressing about it.
Unfortunately, yes. Question this is for Yamrod and Patrice. Knowing what you know now, I believe this came in when you're talking about opening restaurants here. Is there anything that you would do differently?
I mean, this caught us all by surprise. I don't think anybody could have prepared for this. So would I have done anything differently? No, I was about to celebrate 5 years of basically having a successful restaurant. I was one day shy of 5 years. March 17th was our 5-year anniversary, and we had bought, you know, everything to celebrate. And the day before, we were told we have to shut down. There's nothing I could have done differently. I think when you put your heart and soul into something, there's no turning back. You've given everything you have to give. And I think that's why there's so many of us still around now, is because we just can't see it go. It's really sad. It really is, not to get emotional, but you know, to see my fellow restaurateurs that I look up to, some of them were my mentors, being put in the position that they're being put in now. Like, these were good people, these are good restaurant owners, but it's so hard to survive this right now. And it's not, are you doing anything wrong or are you doing anything right? It's has nothing to do with that. It's all about being able to survive. And unfortunately, some of us will survive and some of us won't survive. And that's just how it is, unless we get more government funding.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Personally,
Patrice, I feel if we were allowed to, I would love to give you
I mean, of course, when you do your business plan, you always anticipate worst scenario, but never, we never thought this can be that worst scenario. So nobody could have anticipated this, like, and planned for this. But within what we're given, we're hoping that we'll survive it somehow, pivot some ways, and also hopefully we're going to get some help from the government that will help us survive to the next phase, you know, post-COVID. But otherwise, if I knew what I know now, I don't know if I would even anticipate coming into the business. It's just a very difficult time.
Very difficult. Which is why we hope that everybody who is listening out there supports and get it out. A question just came in about what the best way people can advocate for government assistance. Are there ways that you guys have heard of that are effective or helpful? I know saverestaurants.com, what you mentioned, Jamrot, there you can write your kind of local representative through their website pretty quickly. Are there any other ways that you would encourage any of you people to help reach out and make sure that everyone gets the funding that they need and support?
Everyone means well and want to support in every way they could, but unfortunately, this is bigger than that. It has to come from government, and otherwise, I don't see any other way. I mean, of course, patronize as much, you know, as much as you can, but that's not going to be the solution. It will keep us going, but the solution has to be bigger than that.
Unfortunately, we are in the last 2 minutes of this. So I do need to, at this point, say, oh, there's more questions. I always want to get to them. So this actually does lead me into what I was going to say at the end anyway, which is a big thanks to all of you. This has been enlightening and wonderful, and the conversation is great, and you are all really wonderful people for joining us. And thank you so much. And I did want to give a plug to each of you in ways that we can try to, you know, show support in some way, even though, of course, we need it in many great ways right now. So around the room, Dish City, listen to where you listen to podcasts. Follow them on Twitter and Instagram at Dish City. You can follow Ruth at Ruth E. Tam, and her co-host Patrick at Patrick B. Fort too. Check out dc.eater.com. You'll see Tierney's name all over it, with apparently a new article tomorrow about where you can get your new boozy fix. And you can follow Eater DC on Twitter and Instagram at Eater_DC, and Tierney at Tears2U, number 2. You can follow Purple Patch on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Purple Patch DC. And I was going to plug this, but Patrice did, so I will echo it, that Purple Patch has donated over 3,000 meals for kids in need. So I'm going to ask you on behalf of her to
7 o'clock.
to support their efforts. however you can, if that's through a Venmo payment to @Patrice-Cleary, with cash in store, dropping off prepackaged juice boxes or snacks if you have the means, if you're in the neighborhood. Help. And Latenna, you can follow on Facebook and Instagram at LatennaDC. And I was also going to say, as Yamrot asked everybody as well, support the Independent Restaurant Coalition. They're doing the most that they can to help the industry by pressuring Congress to pass the Restaurant Act 2020. Details are on saverestaurants.com. And lastly, you can follow us ITADC at Facebook and Instagram at @ImpactTravel_DC, and our ITA Global at @ImpactTravelAlliance, where you can find more events being held by like-minded sustainable travelers around the world. So 7 on the dot. Thank you all again so much, attendees, panelists, everybody involved. This has been really fantastic. We look forward to hosting more of you at our next event, and cheers to everybody, and enjoy all of your dining adventures in our wonderful city. Thank you.
Thank you.